The buyer called me on a Tuesday. Not my in-laws. Not my husband. The buyer. A man named Patrick who had purchased a 2019 silver Honda Accord from my in-laws 3 weeks earlier and who had since discovered that the title transfer he had been given was not legally valid and who had been trying to resolve this with the DMV for 2 weeks before deciding to call the number on the original title. My number. He was polite about it. He said he understood this was probably not something I was expecting. He said he had bought the car in good faith and had paid $14,800 for it and had been driving it for 3 weeks and had now been told by the DMV that the title transfer had not been authorized by the registered owner. He asked if I was the registered owner. I said yes. He asked if I had authorized the sale. I said I had been in the hospital for 6 weeks and had not authorized anything. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I was afraid of that." Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments where you are listening from. My name is Grace Kim. I am 34 years old. And the car my in-laws had sold while I was recovering from spinal surgery, the car that was registered in my name, insured in my name, titled in my name, had been sold using a title transfer document that bore a signature that was not mine and that the DMV had flagged when Patrick had attempted to complete the registration. The buyer had the car. I had the title problem. And my in-laws had the $14,800. I had been admitted to the hospital in early March. The surgery had been scheduled for 4 months, a spinal procedure that my neurosurgeon had described as complex but not unusual, with a recovery period of 6 to 8 weeks and a prognosis that was genuinely good. I had prepared for the absence the way I prepare for things that matter. I had organized my affairs, updated my medical proxy, arranged coverage for my work responsibilities, and spoken with my husband James about the practical logistics of the period I would be away. James had said he would handle things. James's parents, Edward and Patricia, who lived 40 minutes away and who had always had the particular quality of parents who remained deeply involved in their adult child's life, had come to stay at our house for the first 2 weeks of my hospitalization. This had been arranged before my surgery as a support structure. James worked long hours and the house required someone present. I had been glad for their help. I had not thought specifically about my car, which sat in the garage and which I would not need for the 6 to 8 weeks of my recovery. I had not thought to say anything about it because it had not occurred to me that there was anything to say. The car was a 2019 Honda Accord that I had purchased 2 years earlier in my name with money from my own savings account. James drove a different car. There had never been any question about whose car was whose. Edward had apparently decided at some point during my hospitalization that the car sitting used in the garage was a resource that could be put to use. I do not know the specific reasoning. I have a general sense of it from the conversation that followed, which suggested that Edward had assessed the situation the way he assessed most situations, in terms of practical efficiency, with a specific blind spot for the distinction between what is available and what is his to arrange. He had sold it while I was in my 5th week of recovery. Patrick's call came during my 7th week, 1 week after my discharge, during the particular vulnerable period of early recovery when you are home but not fully functional and the administrative weight of everything that accumulated during your absence has begun to arrive. I sat in the chair by the window, the one I had been spending most of my time in since coming home, and I held the phone with both hands because my grip was still not reliable and because the information I was receiving required steadiness. I asked Patrick to tell me everything he knew. He did. He had seen the car listed on a private sale platform. He had contacted the seller, a man who had identified himself as the owner's father-in-law and had said the owner was unavailable. He had examined the car, found it in excellent condition and paid $14,800 in cash. He had received a title transfer document with what appeared to be the registered owner's signature. He had taken the document to the DMV. The DMV had flagged the signature as inconsistent with the signature on file for the registered owner. The DMV had placed a hold on the registration pending verification. Patrick had been trying to resolve this for 2 weeks. I said I was sorry for the situation he was in. I said it was not his fault. I said I would be contacting my attorney that afternoon. He said he appreciated that. He said he had been worried he was going to lose the car and the money. I said I was going to try to make sure that did not happen. My attorney was Sandra Chin. She had been handling my personal legal matters for 3 years. I called her from the chair by the window within an hour of ending the call with Patrick. I told her everything. She asked 4 questions. whether I had authorized the sale, whether James had authorized the sale, whether there was any documentation of the transaction, and whether Patrick still had the car. The answers were no, I did not know, I did not yet have it, and yes. She said the signature issue was the central problem. A title transfer signed by someone other than the registered owner was not a valid transfer. The car's legal ownership had not changed. The car was still mine. She said the buyer's position was sympathetic and that ideally the resolution would not cost him his $14,800 for a transaction he had entered in good faith. She said the person who should bear the cost of the resolution was the person who had initiated it. She said she would contact Edward. I spoke with James before Sandra's letter went out. This was a conversation I had been preparing for since Patrick's call. Not with dread exactly, but with the specific intentionality of someone who understands that this is the most important conversation in the immediate situation and that it needs to be right. James came home from work at 6:30. I was in the chair. He looked at me with the expression he had been wearing since my discharge. A combination of relief that I was home and guilt that he had not managed things better in my absence. I told him about Patrick's call. He sat down. I told him about the DMV flag. About the unauthorized signature. About Sandra's assessment. He said his father had told him he was handling the car situation. I asked when. He said during week 3. He said his father had said someone was interested in the car and that it was sitting unused and that it made sense to free up the space and get some value from it. I asked if he had said yes. He looked at his hands. He said he had not said no. I said, James. The car is in my name. I paid for it. Your father sold it using a signature that is not mine. That is not a car situation. That is fraud. He said he knew. I said, I need you to understand that clearly before Sandra's letter goes out. Because the letter is going out. He said he understood. Sandra's letter went to Edward the following morning. It outlined the title situation, the unauthorized signature, the buyer's position, and the resolution required. Edward needed to repay the $14,800 to the estate of the transaction, effectively to make Patrick whole, since the sale he had conducted had not been legally valid and the buyer had been harmed by relying on it. It also noted that the use of a false signature on a legal document was a serious matter that we were not yet escalating formally but that we reserved the right to address if the resolution was not reached within 14 days. Edward called James. I know the nature of that call because James told me about it afterward. Edward had been initially resistant, then defensive, then quiet in the way of someone whose attorney has explained the situation to them clearly. Edward's attorney called Sandra 4 days after the letter. The resolution was negotiated over 2 weeks. Edward repaid Patrick directly, $14,800, the full amount. The title transfer was voided. The car was returned to me, which required Patrick to drive it back, in which he did with the particular graciousness of someone who has been treated fairly in an unfair situation. I drove the car for the first time 3 weeks after it came back. Still recovering, still careful but functional enough to sit behind the wheel and remember what ordinary things feel like after 6 weeks of not having them. The car is the same car it always was. Silver. 2019. My name on the title. The title is in my files now, in a specific folder that also contains a note I made the day after Patrick's call, when I was still in the chair by the window working through the shape of what had happened. The note says, update account authorizations, update property documents, update vehicle information with trusted contact list. I have done all 3. I find that I am more deliberate now about which people have access to which information about my assets. Not because I do not trust anyone. Because I have learned that trust and authorization are different things, and that the difference matters most when you are not available to enforce it. 6 weeks in a hospital teaches you certain things. This was one of them.